Hello, and welcome to Self-Care is Sexy. My name is Chris, and I'll be your host. We're a podcast that's here to generate and share self-care ideas with each other. Last show, we talked about alone time, how to get more of it, the benefits of it, and of course, some ideas on how to take alone time as a part of your self-care. I want to give you a quick preview of what to expect from today's show, and I do this for every episode so that you can get a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about or who's going to be joining us, because I know that your time is valuable. So for today's show, I'm going to be talking about taking responsibility for yourself. I'm going to walk you through some little lessons that might help you, because taking responsibility for ourselves and our own self-care can sometimes be challenging. But first, a few quick housekeeping notes. All right, today we're going to be talking about taking responsibility for yourself, and that includes taking responsibility for your own self-care. And while this might be challenging for some listeners, you may find yourself resistant to what I'm talking about. Whatever comes up for you, I challenge you to sit with it. And if you find your haunches going up, maybe just power through what we're talking about and just feel that resistance. Get used to feeling resistance and notice where that is. Because maybe you don't take responsibility for your own self-care and you don't feel like being lectured. And I get that. But power through it. Even if you're the kind of person that maybe thinks you do take responsibility for your own self-care. Either way, let's get through this together by taking responsibility for ourselves and listening to some ways that we can do that. Now, first of all, let's identify how do we take responsibility for our self-care. Number one, you want to admit that you are the only one, we are the only ones in charge of our own self-care. We don't get to blame others if we don't get the time we need for our self-care. And if you do find that excuses are coming up all the time that get in the way of you being able to do whatever self-care is for you, it's time to start looking at those mediocre excuses and seeing why you're letting them come in the way of what's the most important relationship you're ever going to have, the relationship you have with yourself. Number two, another way that we take responsibility for our self-care is that we do our self-care even when we don't feel like it. Now, if you're new to the show or if you're new to self-care in general, it's going to feel a little weird at first. It's going to feel like work. You're going to have to think about why you're doing things. You're going to have to come up with ideas of what self-care is for you. We can give you all the tips, the tricks, the hacks, the shortcuts, but really it's about you personalizing what self-care is for you. And you have to recognize that it does take some effort. And maybe you're the kind of person that doesn't want to put a lot of effort into yourself. And so you feel challenged, you feel resistant, you feel like these excuses that are popping up are real, that they're real barriers. But in order for us to really get to that other side of self-care, which is self-confidence, self-love, self-sufficiency, to get to that other side, you have to encounter some barriers and get through them. Number three, another way to take responsibility for your self-care is to recognize that you might have a lot of work to do and don't run from it. Now, if you're like me and you've had a lifetime of bullying yourself and hating yourself and treating yourself like a piece of crap last in line, your self-care routine is going to start out real super small, simple, easy, realistic, easy to do. And you're going to have to recognize that, yes, there is a lot of effort to get to that other side, again, of that self-confidence, that self-sufficiency, the self-love, the part of life where you enjoy your own company and you make yourself a priority and you carry yourself differently because of that. You've got a long way to go. If you're in the world of hating on yourself and being negative to yourself, beating yourself up for every little mistake, never taking time for yourself, it's going to feel like a lot of work at first. But as a result, if you create this consistent self-care and that's your default, it's going to completely change your life. Another way that you can take responsibility for your own self-care is to heal that shitty old relationship with yourself. You can't break up with you. You can't shut yourself out. It's not working. You have to heal the pain that you've caused yourself. And you're going to have to make it up to yourself. There's a time in your life where you're going to have to come to a decision. Do you want to have that shitty old relationship with yourself where you beat yourself up for every mistake, where it's always your fault, where you're constantly running ragged and you get no control of your life? Or do you want to step into your power this year and really find what it means to be self-confident, to have self-love, to develop self-esteem, to be able to look yourself in the eyes, in the mirror, and say, I love you, and have it mean something? It's really important that you take this time and this effort to recognize you've hurt yourself. You have done some damage by telling yourself you're ugly or fat or old or not smart enough, or beating yourself up when you make a small mistake, or calling yourself really horrible names in your head. All of that stuff that you've been doing to yourself, it is causing damage. And you have a lot of repair work to do. And while that may seem daunting and like, oh crap, another thing I got to think about, this will, let me be clear, hear me now, my listeners. If you make self-care the priority, it will accomplish all your other New Year's resolutions, goals, aspirations, whatever. If you make self-care the priority, all of the things that you're trying to accomplish in your life will happen with ease, will happen with self-love, and will happen in the most organic, beautiful ways, because you're taking care of the root of the problem, which is you. And last but not least, number 5, how we take responsibility for our self-care is that we recognize no one is coming to save you. I've said it before, I'm going to repeat it until the cows come home. Self-care is about managing yourself. It's not about pedicures, it's not about massages, it's not about new clothes. Those are examples of way that you can love yourself, but that's not what self-care is about. Self-care is gritty, dirty work where you've got to dig up those buried feelings and go through them and process all the pain that you've caused yourself and catch yourself when you start thinking shitty thoughts about yourself and correct them. And that is a lot of work. But friends, no one can do it for you. I can give you my entire self-care routine, and you can follow it to a T. You can white knuckle your way through my self-care routine. It is not going to help you. It will never help you because you're not where I'm at and you're not me. My self-care, while pretty daunting if you look at it, my routines, is for me and has been developed out of mistakes and developed out of trial and error. And that's what I'm asking you to do this year. That's what I'm asking you to commit to. Let go of all these shoulds that you've got floating around from the whole after New Year's resolution glow and get to the heart of the problem, taking care of yourself. And that will solve all of the other things that you might be working towards, like fitness or health or finances or, passion projects. Any of that stuff can be accomplished by first working on the relationship you have with yourself. Now, I'm going to run through that list really quick one more time. The 5 ways that you can take responsibility for your own self-care is: number 1, admit that you're the only one that's in charge. Number 2, do the self-care even when you don't feel like it. Number 3, recognize that there's a lot of work to do. Number 4, heal that shitty old relationship with yourself. And number 5, realize that no one else is going to save you. Now that we've recognized what taking responsibility for our own self-care looks like, what it actually is, I want to talk a little bit about discipline. Right? We're in January. Everyone's trying to, new year, new you. I see it all over the social medias. And frankly, I'm sick of it because especially in 2021, we do not need to reinvent ourselves. We really need to just work on loving who we are at this moment. whatever you look like right now, if you've got a pimple on your face, if your hair is messy, if you're overweight, however you showed up today, I want you to learn to love that version of you and not constantly be pie in the sky obsessing about the version you want to become. Because the version you are right now in real time, however you came to this podcast, is beautiful, is courageous, is amazing, and can do anything they want. But you have to believe that for yourself. And in order to do that, you've got to cultivate some self-care. Now, for those of you that have been listening to my show for a while, I want to kind of take it to a deeper level and talk about discipline. Because I think it's hard to talk about taking responsibility for ourselves and not bringing up discipline. And I just want to start off by saying that discipline is not always about yelling and shit. It's not always about being a drill sergeant and, splashing cold water on yourself to get up in the morning. There is a loving way to cultivate self-discipline. It's called routine. And I know a lot of my spontaneous, fun, flary friends out there are going to have a hard time with this, but it's time to embrace a little bit of routine in your life. And how we're going to do that, how we're going to work with discipline. I've got 5 ways that you can really work with discipline in a loving, positive manner. So instead of beating yourself up, yelling at yourself for mistakes, or treating yourself like absolute garbage, you can start to cultivate responsibility in a positive and loving manner. And how you do that, number 1, you gotta find a good why. Right? You gotta find the reason why you're trying to develop yourself or have a better relationship with yourself, or why you want to lose the weight, or why you want to get your finances together, or why the biggest passion project that you're trying to work on needs to get finished, this year. Whatever why it is that's driving your self-development, you've got to find it. But don't force yourself to change just because you've been told to. Make the changes because that's what you want to do. Make the changes and implement a routine because you love yourself enough to consistently give yourself what you know you need. It took me a really long time to develop my self-care routine. I'm going to go through it with you at the end of the show, so if you're interested in ideas, stick with me. Number 2, another way that you can work on this routine and this discipline is you've got to start out by making it easy. If you really want to repair the lifetime of shit-tastic thoughts that you've had about yourself, you're gonna need to start easy and realistic. Because you actually want to start out cultivating a win, right? You want to feel positive about making these changes, whatever that might be for you. And if making self-care a priority this year, taking better care of yourself, loving yourself, repairing that relationship with yourself, it seems big and daunting, but you can start out by doing something really small and really easy. Make it realistic. Is it realistic that you're going to drink 64 ounces of water every single day this year if you hardly ever drink water at all? Is that actually a realistic self-care plan? No, not really. You need to start out small. You need to start out realistic. I'm going to commit to drinking at least 1 bottle of water, 16 ounces a day of water, no matter what. And when you make them small and when you make those goals easy, it makes discipline and routine and loving yourself so much easier. Number 3, how you work with discipline in a loving manner is you show up. You show up even when you don't feel like it. Even if you tell yourself, I can just reschedule my self-care, I can do it tomorrow, whatever. No, stop that crap right now. Respect the you that put in the effort to come up with a self-care plan in the first place and then follow through. Number 4, how you're going to work with routine and discipline is you're going to take control of your thoughts. Now listen, let's get realistic about this. Let's just cut to the chase, right? We could hem and haw about it all day, but we're going to cut to the chase. You and I, we're going to have shitty thoughts about ourselves. They're going to come up. And you're going to think your way out of doing things for yourself all the time. If you say to yourself, you know what, Chris, I really want to get